The ice in his bourbon had melted by the time I approached his table. That was the thing about Dominic Santoro, he never seemed to actually drink what I brought him. He simply held the glass, fingers wrapped around the crystal tumbler like it was a prop in some private play only he understood. "Can I get you a fresh one, Mr. Santoro?" I asked, notepad ready, professional smile fixed in place. His dark eyes lifted to mine, and for the 100th time in 3 months, I felt that strange pull in my chest. Like standing too close to the edge of something high. "No, Maya. Thank you." He always used my name. Never miss or waitress or the dozens of other dismissive terms I'd grown accustomed to in my 5 years at Velvet and Steel. Just Maya. Spoken in that low voice with the faint trace of an accent I couldn't quite place. I should have walked away then. Should have moved on to table 7 where the hedge fund guys were getting loud, their laughter cutting through the lounge's carefully curated ambience of jazz and muted conversations. But something in Dominic's expression held me there. "There's something for you," he said, sliding a cream-colored envelope across the dark wood table. My stomach tightened. In my experience, envelopes from men in expensive suits never contained anything good. I can't accept tips directly. House policy. It's not a tip. The way he said it so certain, so fine, I made my hands tremble slightly as I picked up the envelope. It was heavy, expensive paper stock. The kind that whispered money before you even opened it. "Mr. Santoro, I really shouldn't—" "Open it later," he interrupted gently. "When you're alone. And it's Dominic. I've asked you to call me Dominic." He had. Multiple times over the past 3 months of Tuesdays and Fridays, his regular nights at the corner booth, I'd never been able to make myself do it. There was something too intimate about using his first name. About acknowledging the strange connection that seemed to exist between us despite the careful distance I maintained. I clutched the envelope, feeling the weight of whatever was inside. I should get back to work. Of course. His expression didn't change, but something flickered in those dark eyes. Disappointment, maybe. Or resignation. I made it halfway across the lounge before curiosity overwhelmed caution. In the shadow between the bar and the kitchen entrance, I opened the envelope. The check slipped out first. $50,000. Made out to me. Signed in bold, decisive handwriting, Dominic Santoro. My vision blurred at the edges. $50,000. More than I made in a year. Enough to cover Emma's mounting medical bills from her asthma specialist. Enough for the inhaler refills I'd been rationing. Stretching 3 days into 5 because I couldn't afford to fill the prescription early. Enough to stop the constant grinding panic that woke me at 3 a.m., calculating and recalculating numbers that never quite added up. The note was small, written on matching cardstock. For Emma's future, no strings. He knew my daughter's name. My hand shook as I shoved the check and note back into the envelope. This was wrong. This was dangerous. Men like Dominic Santoro didn't give away $50,000 without expecting something in return, no matter what the note claimed. I walked back to his table on legs that felt disconnected from my body. He watched me approach with that same unreadable expression, the melted bourbon still untouched in his hand. "I can't accept this," I said, placing the envelope firmly on the table between us. For the first time since I'd met him, genuine surprise crossed Dominic's features. "Why not?" "Because I don't know what it costs." The words came out stronger than I felt. Around us, the lounge continued its elegant dance conversations flowing, glasses clinking, the piano player transitioning into something slow and melancholy. But in our corner, the air felt thick, charged with something I didn't have a name for. Dominic was quiet for a long moment, his fingers still wrapped around that damn glass. When he finally spoke, his voice was soft, almost sad. "The cost is already paid, Maya. The question is whether you'll let someone help you." My throat tightened. "I don't need help. Everyone needs help," he said. And there was something in his tone, something personal, something that spoke of old wounds. "The only question is whether you're brave enough to accept it." I should have taken the envelope. Should have swallowed my pride and thought about Emma, about the inhaler sitting at home with 1 dose left, about the medical bills stacked on my kitchen counter like an accusation. Instead, I met Dominic Santoro's dark eyes and said, "I'm sorry." The answer is no. Then I walked away, leaving the envelope on his table, feeling his gaze follow me across the room like a physical touch. I didn't know then that refusing Dominic Santoro was something people didn't do. Didn't know that my rejection had just made me the most interesting thing in his carefully controlled world. Didn't know that in 3 days, when Emma couldn't breathe and I had no one to call, he would show up at her hospital bed like he'd been waiting for the moment I finally broke. All I knew was that I'd just turned down $50,000, and I had no idea if I'd made the bravest decision of my life or the stupidest. The envelope stayed on Dominic's table for the rest of my shift. Every time I passed the corner booth, I felt its presence like a rebuke. He didn't mention it again, didn't press or plead. He simply sat in his usual position, watching the room with those dark, unreadable eyes, watching me. I told myself I'd made the right choice. Pride was all I had left some days, and I wasn't going to trade it for money, no matter how desperately I needed it. The universe, apparently, had other ideas. 2 nights later, Jerry, a regular who'd been getting progressively handsy with his tips, cornered me in the stockroom. His breath reeked of whiskey and entitlement as he backed me against the shelving. "Come on, sweetheart. Just 1 drink after your shift. I tip good, don't I?" My heart hammered against my ribs, fight or flight instincts screaming. "I need to get back to the floor. Just 1 drink." The stockroom door opened. Marco, our floor manager, stood in the doorway with an expression I'd never seen before, cold, almost dangerous. "Jerry, you need to leave, now. Now." Something in Marco's tone made Jerry stumble backward, hands raised. "Fine. Jesus, can't even talk to a girl anymore." After Jerry left, Marco turned to me. "You okay?" I nodded, still shaken. "How did you know?" "Got a call," Marco said shortly. "Someone said Jerry was bothering staff. He's banned from Velvet and Steel permanently." Someone. I knew exactly who that someone was. The next morning I found my car, which had broken down in the parking lot 3 days ago, seriously repaired. A note under the wiper read, "Consider it a tip." The handwriting was familiar. That afternoon, groceries appeared at my apartment door. Nothing extravagant, but thoughtful Emma's favorite cereal, the brand of coffee I usually couldn't afford, fresh fruit that didn't have bruises. No note this time. There didn't need to be. "Girl, you need to be careful." Jenna cornered me during our break on Friday, her dark eyes serious. "That man is interested in you, and that's not a good thing." "What man?" I asked, though I already knew. "Dominic Santoro. You know who his family is, right?" When I shook my head, Jenna glanced around before lowering her voice. "The Santoros basically own half this city. Restaurants, real estate, construction, and some other businesses that aren't exactly legal." My stomach dropped. "What kind of businesses? The kind where people don't ask questions if they want to keep breathing?" Jenna gripped my arm. "I've worked here for 5 years. I've seen women catch his attention before. It never ends well." "Nothing's happening," I protested. "He's just a customer. Customers don't get banned for touching waitresses. Customers don't make cars magically get fixed overnight." Jenna's expression softened. "I'm not saying he's going to hurt you, but men like Dominic Santoro don't do anything without a reason. Whatever he wants from you, it's going to cost more than you're willing to pay." That night, I picked Emma up from the neighbor who watched her after school, my mind churning with Jenna's warnings. My daughter bounced through the door ahead of me, chattering about her day, about the butterfly she'd seen at recess, about, "Look what I got, Mummy." Emma held up a book, and my blood turned to ice. It was a collector's edition of The Princess and the Garden, Emma's favorite fairy tale. The cover was embossed leather, the pages gilt-edged. The kind of book that costs more than our monthly grocery budget. "Where did you get that?" My voice came out sharper than intended. Emma's smile faltered. It was on the doorstep with my name on it. "Did I do something wrong?" I forced my expression to soften, taking the book from her small hands. "No, baby. You didn't do anything wrong." Inside the cover, a card. "For the princess. D." He knew where we lived, Knew Emma's name, knew her favorite story. The groceries, the repaired car, those had been invasive enough. But this crossed a line I didn't even know existed. Go wash your hands for dinner, I told Emma gently. I need to make a quick phone call. I didn't call. I went straight to Velvet and Steel, the book clutched in my hands like evidence. Dominic sat in his usual booth, earlier than normal. His eyes tracked me across the room as I approached, something shifting in his expression when he saw what I carried. I placed the book on his table with deliberate force. Stay away from my daughter. The words came out low, fierce. Around us, conversations continued, but I felt like we existed in a bubble of tension separate from the rest of the lounge. Dominic looked at the book, then slowly raised his eyes to mine. I would never harm a child, Maya. I'm not the monster you think I am. Then what are you? The question burst out of me, all my fear and confusion and reluctant fascination compressed into 3 words. Dominic stood, buttoning his suit jacket with deliberate precision. He was tall-eyed, forgotten how tall, and standing this close, I could smell his cologne, something dark and expensive that made my head spin. Someone who sees when people are drowning, he said quietly, and someone who won't watch you go under. He left the book on the table as he walked past me, his shoulder nearly brushing mine. At the lounge entrance, he paused, glancing back. The gifts will stop if that's what you want. But the offer stands, Maya. When you're ready to stop drowning alone, I'll be here. Then he was gone, leaving me standing beside his empty booth with a children's book, and the terrible realization that I hadn't been refusing his help. I'd been testing him. And somehow, impossibly, he'd passed every test. Wednesday morning started normal. Emma coughed a little at breakfast, but she'd had a cold for 3 days. Nothing unusual, nothing that set off alarm bells. I should have known better. By the time I picked her up from school, her breathing had that wheeze I'd learned to dread. I gave her a puff from the inhaler, the last one. The pharmacy wouldn't refill until Friday when my paycheck cleared. Just 2 more days, I whispered, more to myself than to Emma. We can make it 2 more days. At 2 a.m. I woke to a sound that stopped my heart. Emma was gasping, each breath a horrible, wheezing struggle. I ran to her room and found her sitting up in bed, her small chest heaving with effort, her lips tinged blue in the nightlight's glow. Baby, it's okay. Mummy's here. My hands shook as I grabbed the empty inhaler, pressing it anyway, hoping for some residual medication. Nothing. Emma's eyes were wide with fear, her small hand clutching at her throat. She couldn't get enough air, couldn't breathe. I grabbed my phone, nearly dropping it twice before I managed to dial 911. My daughter, she can't breathe. Asthma attack. The dispatcher's voice was calm, asking questions I could barely process. Emma's age, symptoms, address. How long had she been like this? Did I have an inhaler? It's empty, I choked out. I couldn't. The prescription, ma'am. Stay calm. Ambulance is 3 minutes away. 3 minutes felt like 3 hours. I held Emma, trying to remember the breathing exercises from the pamphlets I couldn't afford to follow up on. Slow breaths, in through the nose. But Emma couldn't do slow breaths. She could barely breathe at all. The ambulance finally arrived, paramedics flooding into our tiny apartment with equipment and competence that made me feel utterly useless. They put an oxygen mask on Emma's face, checked her vitals with practiced efficiency. Severe asthma attack, one of them said. We need to transport immediately. I climbed into the ambulance, holding Emma's small hand as they worked. Her breathing was slightly better with the oxygen, but her eyes still held that terrible fear that made me want to claw apart the world. At the everything became a blur of fluorescent lights and urgent voices. They whisked Emma away immediately. Critical, they said. Dangerously low oxygen levels. I stood in the waiting room, suddenly alone, drowning in paperwork I couldn't focus on. Insurance verification. Emergency contact information. Previous medical history. The questions piled up like accusations. Why hadn't I refilled the inhaler? Why hadn't I taken her to the specialist, the pediatrician recommended? Why was I always one crisis away from complete collapse, Ms. Rivera? A nurse approached, clipboard in hand. Your daughter is stable for now, but we need to admit her for observation. Do you have someone we can call? Family? The question hit like a physical blow. Family. I'd called my parents once after Emma was born. They'd made it clear that my mistake wasn't welcome in their lives. Emma's father had never even met her, had disappeared when I was 3 months pregnant. No, I whispered. There's no one. The nurse's expression softened with pity that made me want to scream. What about an emergency contact? I looked down at the form. The blank lines seemed to expand, swallowing everything. Emergency contact. Someone to call when your world falls apart. Someone who gives a damn if you're drowning. I had no one. Tears blurred my vision as I tried to write something, anything. My neighbor Mrs. Chun's number maybe, though she was 70 and could barely manage her own emergencies. Or Jenna from work, who had 3 kids of her own and put my name down. The voice came from behind me, low and familiar. I spun around, nearly dropping the clipboard. Dominic Santoro stood in the hospital corridor, still in his tailored suit despite the late hour. His dark eyes fixed on me with an intensity that stole what little breath I had left. "How did you—" my voice cracked. "I have people who keep me informed when it matters." He said it simply, like having a network that monitored my life was perfectly normal. Where is she? Should have been angry. Should have demanded to know how he knew, why he was here, what gave him the right to appear in my crisis like some dark guardian angel I never asked for. Instead, I broke. "Room 4, I whispered. "Pediatric ward. They won't let me back yet." They said. A sob cut off my words. Dominic closed the distance between us in 2 strides. His hand touched my shoulder, warm and solid and impossibly steady. "Breathe, Maya," he said quietly. "I'm here now. You're not alone." And, God help me, I believed him. He glanced at the nurse, who was watching our interaction with wide eyes. "Which way to pediatrics?" "Sir, only family can. I'm family," Dominic said, his voice carrying an authority that made the nurse's protest die in her throat. He looked back at me, his expression softening. "Aren't I, Maya? I should have said no. Should have maintained my boundaries, my pride, my independence. Instead, I nodded. Dominic's hand moved from my shoulder to take mine, his fingers lacing through mine like they belonged there. "Show me where our daughter is," he said, and those 2 words, our daughter, shattered the last of my resistance. Dominic didn't ask permission. He simply walked past the nurse's station like he owned the entire hospital, and, for all I knew, maybe he did. The staff parted for him instinctively, the way people move for someone accustomed to being obeyed. I followed in his wake, still clutching the clipboard with his name now written in the emergency contact line. His handwriting was better than mine, bold and decisive, even in this fluorescent-lit nightmare. Emma's room was at the end of the pediatric ward. Through the small window I could see her, so impossibly small in the hospital bed. Oxygen mask covering half her face, monitors beeping a steady rhythm that was the only thing keeping me from completely falling apart. Dominic paused at the door, glancing back at me. "Ready?" I nodded, not trusting my voice. He pushed open the door gently, and we stepped inside. The room smelled of antiseptic and fear. Emma's eyes fluttered open at the sound, widening when she saw us, when she saw him. "Mummy?" Her voice was muffled by the oxygen mask, small and frightened. "I'm here, baby." I moved to her bedside, brushing the hair from her forehead. Her skin was still too warm, her breathing still labored despite the oxygen. "How are you feeling?" "Tired," Emma whispered. Then her eyes tracked past me to Dominic, who stood at the foot of her bed, his tall frame incongruous next to the cheerful pediatric furniture and cartoon murals. Emma stared at him for a long moment, her 6-year-old mind processing this unexpected presence. Then, with the simple logic of childhood, she asked, "Are you a prince?" Something cracked in Dominic's expression, a softness I'd never seen, vulnerable and utterly genuine. He moved around the bed slowly, like approaching a wild animal he didn't want to startle, and lowered himself into the chair on Emma's other side. His expensive suit looked ridiculous next to the plastic hospital furniture, but he sat with the same dignity he carried everywhere. "No, Principessa," he said gently, the Italian endearment rolling off his tongue. "Just a friend." Emma considered this, her brow furrowing in the way it did when she was thinking hard about something. "Mummy doesn't have friends," she said finally, her honesty cutting through me like glass. She says we only have each other. The words hung in the air. True. Devastating. Exposing the lonely poverty of our life in a way no dollar amount could. I'd told her that. When she'd asked why other kids had grandparents and aunts and uncles at school events. When she'd wondered why it was always just us. We have each other, baby. That's all we need. Except it wasn't all we needed. It had never been enough, no matter how hard I pretended. Dominic glanced at me, something unreadable in his dark eyes. Pity, maybe, or understanding, or both. Then he returned his attention to Emma, his expression gentle. Well, now you have me too, he said quietly. If that's all right with your mother. He was giving me an out. A choice. I could send him away right now, thank him politely for coming, maintain our isolation and my pride. Keep our lives small and struggling, but entirely ours. Or I could let him in, this dangerous, generous stranger who somehow knew Emma was here, who came without being asked, who looked at my daughter with a gentleness that made my chest ache. Before I could form an answer, Emma's small hand reached out from beneath the hospital blanket. Her fingers, so tiny and fragile, wrapped around Dominic's much larger hand. Stay, she whispered, her voice muffled by the oxygen mask but clear in its need. Please. Dominic's expression transformed. He looked down at Emma's hand in his, like she'd just handed him something infinitely precious and breakable. His other hand came up to cover hers carefully, protectively. Okay, Principessa, he said softly. I'll stay. Then his eyes lifted to mine, and in them I saw everything he wasn't saying. The choice was never really yours, not the moment Emma reached for him. Not the moment she asked him to stay with that desperate trust children reserve for people they instinctively know are safe. I sank into the chair on Emma's other side, my throat tight with emotions I couldn't name. My daughter's small hand in Dominic Santoro's. His thumb tracing gentle circles over her knuckles while monitors beeped and hospital sounds filtered through the walls. This man I'd spent months refusing. This dangerous stranger from a world I didn't understand. Holding my daughter's hand like it was made of glass. Thank you for coming, I whispered, the words inadequate but necessary. Dominic's eyes met mine over Emma's bed. There's nowhere else I would be. And in that moment, sitting in a hospital room at 3 a.m. with my sick daughter between us, I realized something terrifying. I'd just let Dominic Santoro into our lives. Not just into our space, but into our hearts. Nothing, absolutely nothing would ever be the same. Dominic stayed. When the nurses came at 4 a.m. to enforce visiting hours, he simply looked at them with those dark, unreadable eyes and said, I'll be staying with my family tonight. Something in his tone, or maybe his presence, made them retreat without argument. I didn't ask how he did it. By now, I was beginning to understand that Dominic Santoro operated by different rules than the rest of us. He didn't make a fuss about staying. He simply removed his suit jacket, draped it over the back of his chair, and rolled up his sleeves. The casual gesture revealed 4 arms I'd never seen before, strong, marked with a few faint scars that hinted at a past he'd never discussed. Around 5 a.m., he disappeared into the hallway. I could hear his voice, low and rapid in Italian, making calls. When he returned 20 minutes later, he carried 2 cups of coffee that actually smelled good, not the burnt sludge from the hospital vending machine. Drink, he said, pressing one into my hands. You need to stay strong for her. The coffee was perfect. The exact way I took it, with too much sugar and a splash of cream. He'd remembered from watching me at the lounge, from 3 months of Tuesday and Friday nights. How did you know? I pay attention, Maya. His voice was quiet. 2 things that matter. Emma stirred around 6 a.m., whimpering softly. Dominic was at her side immediately, his large hand gentle on her forehead. She, Principessa, you're okay. Your mama's here. I'm here. His voice had gone impossibly soft. Tender in a way that didn't match the dangerous man Jenna had warned me about. Emma's eyes opened, still glazed with fever and medication, but calmer than before. Story? She whispered. I started to reach for my phone. I usually read her stories from a free app, but Dominic was already pulling out his own phone, scrolling with practiced ease. "What story would you like?" he asked Emma. "The princess," she said immediately. "With the garden, her favorite." The one he'd given her, the expensive collector's edition that still sat on my kitchen counter because I couldn't bring myself to return it or keep it. Dominic found the story online and began to read, his deep voice wrapping around the familiar words. I'd read this story to Emma 100 times, but hearing it in Dominic's voice was different. He gave each character distinct voices, added gentle inflections that made Emma's eyes light up despite her exhaustion. He read 3 stories before Emma finally drifted back to sleep, her small chest rising and falling more easily now, the crisis passing. In the quiet that followed, with only the beep of monitors and Emma's steady breathing, Dominic turned to me. "The check," he said quietly. "Take it, Maya." My defenses, worn down by fear and exhaustion, flared weakly. "I told you. I know what you told me." His voice was firm, but not unkind. "And I understand pride. I understand not wanting to owe anyone. But this isn't about pride anymore. It's about Emma." He leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, hands clasped between them. "Use it for her medical bills. For the asthma specialist she clearly needs. For inhaler refills, you won't have to ration like you've been doing." His eyes held mine, intense and knowing. "Yes, I know about that too. Mrs. Chun mentioned it when she asked me if I could help with the pharmacy copay. My neighbor had talked to him. I've been watching out for you," Dominic said simply. "Both of you. Because someone should." "Why?" The question came out broken. "Why do you care so much about us?" Dominic was silent for a long moment, his gaze distant. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a weight I'd never heard before. "Because someone should have cared about my mother when she was drowning too. And no one did." The vulnerability in his admission cracked something open in my chest. "What happened to her?" "She died when I was 15. His jaw tightened. "Stress, poverty, working 3 jobs trying to give me and my sister everything. Her heart just gave out one day." He looked down at his hands. "I found her on the kitchen floor when I came home from school." "Dominic," I reached for him without thinking, my hand covering his. "I was too young to save her," he continued, his voice rough. "Too young to understand how bad things were. She hid it from us, the way you hide things from Emma, pretending everything was fine when she was barely surviving." His eyes lifted to mine, dark and fierce and full of old pain. "I'm not too young anymore, Maya. I have the resources. I have the power. And I'll be damned if I watch another woman work herself to death for her child when I could help." His hand turned, fingers lacing through mine. "So please, let me help. Not because you owe me, not because I expect anything in return, but because Emma deserves a mother who isn't drowning, and because you deserve to breathe." The tears came then, hot and unstoppable. All the fear, all the exhaustion, all the months and years of barely holding on, it all broke at once. Dominic pulled me into his arms, and I let him. Let myself collapse against his chest while he held me steady, one hand cradling the back of my head like I was something precious. "I've got you," he murmured. "I've got both of you. I promise." And for the first time in 6 years of fighting alone, I let myself believe that maybe, just maybe, someone actually did. I took the check. The next morning, after Emma's breathing had fully stabilized, Dominic made a phone call. Within an hour, Dr. Sarah Chun, one of the city's top pediatric pulmonologists, appeared in Emma's room. "Mr. Santoro asked me to consult," she said warmly, already reviewing Emma's chart. "Let's make sure we get this young lady breathing easy, shall we?" I watched in stunned silence as Dr. Chun conducted a thorough examination, asking questions no a doctor had time for, explaining treatment options I'd never known existed. She prescribed new medications, a better inhaler system, and insisted on a follow-up appointment the following week. "Don't worry about the cost," she said when I started to ask. "Mr. Santoro has arranged everything." When she left, I turned to Dominic, who'd been standing quietly by the window. "You can't just—" "I can," he said simply. And I did. By the time Emma was discharged that afternoon, Dominic had also somehow reduced our hospital bill to a fraction of what it should have been, arranged a prescription delivery service for Emma's medications, and secured the follow-up appointments we needed. It was overwhelming and humiliating, and the biggest relief I'd ever felt, all tangled together in my chest. "My car's outside," Dominic said, as a nurse brought a wheelchair for Emma. "Hospital policy," even though she insisted she could walk. "You don't have to, Maya." He said my name like a period at the end of a sentence. "Let me drive you home." So I did, because I was tired of fighting. Tired of pretending I could do everything alone. The SUV was black and sleek, with leather seats Emma immediately declared were like sitting on a cloud. She chattered the entire drive, her natural energy returning now that she could breathe properly, telling Dominic about her school, her best friend Zoe, the butterfly garden she wanted to plant someday. Dominic listened like her words were the most important thing he'd ever heard. When we pulled up to my apartment building, I saw it through his eyes. The peeling paint, the broken intercom, the neighborhood that was safe enough but just barely. Dominic carried Emma up the 3 flights. Our building's elevator had been broken for 2 months. She wrapped her arms around his neck, her small voice asking him questions about his car, his watch, whether he'd ever seen a real butterfly garden. "Not yet," he told her, "but maybe we'll plant one together someday." The casual promise made my throat tight. Inside our apartment, Dominic set Emma gently on the couch. He straightened, looking around our home. The thrift store furniture I'd tried to make cheerful with bright throw pillows. The taped-up window I couldn't afford to fix. The radiator that clanked but barely worked. The careful poverty I'd worked so hard to make feel like enough. I saw him take it all in, and shame burned hot in my chest. "Thank you," I said, because what else could I say? "For everything. I don't know how I'll ever. I don't want repayment." Dominic's voice was firm. "Then what do you want?" The question that had been haunting me for months finally escaped. Dominic stepped closer, close enough that I could smell his cologne, something expensive and dark that made my head spin. His eyes held mine, intense and searching. "Have dinner with me." Of all the things I'd expected him to say, that wasn't one of them. "What? Dinner? Just the 2 of us?" His voice softened. "Let me take you somewhere nice, where you can breathe for an hour without calculating the cost of everything on the menu. Where you can just be Maya, not Emma's mother, or the waitress, or the woman drowning in medical bills. Just you." My heart hammered against my ribs. "That's what you want? Dinner?" "I want to know you," Dominic said quietly. "Not the version you show the world to survive. The real you. This was the price, then. Not money, but me. My time, my company, my carefully guarded self. And if I say no?" I whispered. Something flickered in his expression, disappointment, but also understanding. "Then I say goodnight and nothing changes. The help doesn't stop. Emma still gets her medication. The appointments stay scheduled. You're not obligated to me, Maya." He paused, his dark eyes searching mine. "But I'm asking anyway. Have dinner with me because you want to, not because you owe me." I should have said no. Should have maintained my boundaries, kept him at arm's length, protected myself from whatever this was becoming. But I thought about his hands, gentle on Emma's forehead. His voice reading fairy tales at 3 a.m., the way he'd held me while I broke apart, like I was something worth keeping safe. "Okay," I heard myself say. "Dinner." Dominic's smile was small but genuine, transforming his usually controlled expression into something almost boyish. "Tomorrow night. I'll pick you up at 7. I'll need to arrange a sitter. Already done." Mrs. Chun said she'd be happy to watch Emma, at my surprised look. He added, "I asked her this morning. She's very fond of you both." Of course he'd already arranged it. Dominic Santoro didn't ask questions without knowing the answers. After he left, I stood in my small living room, Emma already asleep on the couch, exhausted from her ordeal. I looked at the closed door, at the space Dominic had occupied, and realized with startling clarity that I hadn't agreed to dinner out of obligation. I wanted to go. Wanted to know this man who'd appeared in my life like a storm, who'd somehow become essential in the space of 72 hours. And that terrified me more than anything else. The restaurant didn't have prices on the menu. That was my first sign I was catastrophically out of my depth. The second was the way the Martadi greeted Dominic by name Mr. Santoro. "Your usual table is ready," and escorted us through the dining room like we were royalty. Other diners glanced our way. Some nodded respectfully. Others quickly looked away, like making eye contact with Dominic Santoro was something they couldn't afford. Our table overlooked the city, floor-to-ceiling windows offering a view of light stretching toward the horizon. It was beautiful and terrifying, and nothing like anywhere I'd ever been. "You look nervous," Dominic observed as I studied the menu, trying not to visibly panic at dishes described in French. "I am nervous. No point in lying. I don't belong here. You belong wherever you choose to be." He reached across the table, his fingers brushing mine. "And I chose here, with you." The waiter appeared, and Dominic ordered for both of us in flawless French. I should have been annoyed. I was perfectly capable of ordering for myself, but mostly I was grateful not to mangle the pronunciation. Wine arrived first, poured into crystal glasses that probably cost more than my weekly paycheck. I took a sip and tried not to think about it. "Tell me about yourself," I said, desperate to fill the silence. "The real you, not just the man who sits in the corner booth." Dominic smiled slightly. "What do you want to know?" "Everything. Where you grew up, your family, how you—" I gestured vaguely at the restaurant, the view, the obvious wealth. "How you became this." He was quiet for a moment, swirling wine in his glass. When he spoke, his voice was measured, careful. "I grew up in the old neighborhood, North Side, near the docks. My father worked construction when he could find work. My mother cleaned houses." He paused. "After she died, my father changed, became harder, more ambitious." "Is that how you got into the family business?" I asked, echoing Jenna's warnings. Dominic's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes, acknowledgement, perhaps respect for my directness. "Yes, my father built an empire. Restaurants, real estate, construction companies. I inherited it when he passed 3 years ago." What he didn't say spoke louder than his words. The careful gaps in his timeline. The way he framed family business like it was something entirely legitimate. The scars on his knuckles that I'd noticed at the hospital. "And your sister?" I asked, shifting to safer ground. "Sophia?" His expression softened immediately. "She teaches art history at the university. Completely refused to have anything to do with the business." Pride colored his voice. "She's brilliant. Stubborn. Reminds me of someone else I know." I felt heat rise to my cheeks. "I'm not brilliant. You're raising a remarkable daughter alone, working yourself to exhaustion, and still managing to maintain your integrity." Dominic's eyes held mine. "That's not just brilliant, Maya. That's extraordinary." The food arrived, course after course of things I couldn't pronounce, but that tasted like heaven. Between bites we talked. Dominic asked about my life, my dreams before Emma, what I wanted for the future. "I wanted to be a teacher," I admitted. "It's elementary school. I loved working with kids." I laughed softly. Seems like a lifetime ago. "Why did you stop?" "Because I got pregnant at 22 with a man who disappeared the moment he saw the positive test. Because my parents told me I'd made my bed and needed to lie in it. Because survival doesn't leave room for dreams." The bitterness in my voice surprised me. I usually kept that locked away, hidden beneath the careful optimism I showed Emma. Dominic reached across the table, taking my hand in his. "What if I told you those dreams don't have to stay dead?" "What do you mean?" "I mean, you could go back to school, finish your degree, become the teacher you wanted to be." His thumb traced circles on my palm. "I could help make that happen." My breath caught. "Dominic, before you refuse," he interrupted gently, "think about Emma. Think about showing her that dreams can come true, even delayed ones. That her mother is more than just someone who survives." The temptation was almost painful. To go back to school, to become something more than a waitress counting tips. "Why?" I whispered. Why do you want to help me so much? Dominic was quiet for a long moment, his dark eyes searching mine. When he spoke, his voice was low and intense. Because from the moment I saw you, I couldn't look away. You have this light, Maya, this strength and goodness that my world doesn't have. And He stopped, seeming to choose his words carefully. I want to protect that light. Nurture it. Make sure it never goes out. That sounds like more than just helping someone, I said, my heart racing. It is. His grip on my hand tightened slightly. I'm not good at pretending, Maya. I want you. And Emma, I want to come home to your voices. I want to teach Emma to read. I want to wake up next to you and know that for once in my life I'm doing something purely good. The raw honesty in his words stole my breath. My world isn't safe, he continued. I'm not the man you probably wish I was. But I have a code. I protect what's mine. And I want you both to be mine. His eyes held mine, fierce and vulnerable. Will you let me try? I should have run. Should have recognized the danger in his words, in the intensity of his gaze, in the way he talked about possession like it was protection. But all I could think about was his gentleness with Emma, his rage on my behalf, the way he looked at me like I was something precious instead of something convenient. I need to think about it, I whispered. Dominic nodded slowly. That's all I ask. When he drove me home later, he walked me to my door but didn't try to kiss me. Just looked at me with those dark, unreadable eyes and said, "Good night." Maya, as I watched him leave, I realized the truth. I wasn't thinking about whether to let him in. I was already falling, and I had no idea how to stop. 3 weeks passed in a dream. Dominic became part of our lives with surprising ease. He drove Emma to her follow-up appointments with Dr. Chun, sitting patiently in waiting rooms while reading his phone. He brought takeout on my late shifts, always my favorites, always perfectly timed. He read Emma bedtime stories in that deep, gentle voice that made my daughter's eyes light up. Emma started calling him Dom, the first time she did it. His expression had transformed, something raw and vulnerable crossing his features before he smiled and said, "I like that, Principessa." I watched them together constantly, this dangerous man and my innocent daughter, and felt something terrifying taking root in my chest. Something that looked like family, like belonging, like home. Then everything shattered. I arrived at Velvet and Steel for my Thursday shift to find 2 dark sedans parked outside, and Marco pacing near the entrance, his face ashen. "Ellie, thank God." He grabbed my arm. "We need to talk. Now." He pulled me into his office, closing the door with shaking hands. "Did you know about Dominic Santoro?" Ice flooded my veins. "Know what? He's under federal investigation. FBI agents were here an hour ago, asking questions." Marco ran a hand through his hair. "RICO charges, Maya. Racketeering, money laundering, ties to organized crime. They're saying he runs one of the biggest criminal operations in the city." The words hit like physical blows. RICO, organized crime, criminal operation. That's not. I started but stopped because it wasn't it. Hadn't I seen the signs? The way people deferred to him? The scars on his hands? Jenna's warnings? The careful gaps in his stories? I'd known. Deep down I'd known, and I'd chosen not to look too closely. "They asked about you specifically," Marco continued, his voice low. "Wanted to know about your relationship with him. Maya, if you're involved in any of his... I'm not involved in anything." My voice came out strangled. I didn't know. But that was a lie. I'd known something was wrong. I'd just been too desperate, too grateful, too goddamn attracted to him to care. My phone buzzed. Dominic's name lit up the screen. "Don't answer that," Marco warned. The FBI said. I answered anyway, stepping out of his office. "What the hell is going on?" "Maya." Dominic's voice was tight, controlled. "Don't believe everything you hear. Can we talk? Is it true?" My hand shook. "Are you under federal investigation?" Silence. Then, yes, the admission made my knees weak. "For what? Exactly." "RICO violations. Alleged connections to organized crime." He said it clinically, like reading a grocery list. "The charges are politically motivated, Maya. Rivals trying to stop." I couldn't breathe. Just stop. You used me. Got close to me and Emma to what? Have an alibi? A cover? No. His voice turned fierce. Everything I've done for you and Emma has been real. My feelings are real. The investigation has nothing to do with you. Your feelings. I laughed, the sound brittle. I don't even know who you are. Then let me show you. Dominic's words came fast now, urgent. Meet me. Let me explain everything, the truth about who I am, what I do, why I'm being investigated. And then you can decide if you want me in your life. Why should I trust anything you say? Because you already do. His voice softened. You let me near Emma. You don't do that for someone you truly fear, Maya. You know me. You know I'd never hurt you or her. He was right. Damn him. Despite everything, despite the FBI and the RICO charges and the organized crime allegations, some part of me still trusted him. Still believed in the man who read fairy tales at 3 a.m., who held Emma's hand in the hospital, who looked at me like I was something precious. Where? I whispered. The warehouse on 5th and Main. Midnight. He paused. Come alone. I'll tell you everything. No more secrets, no more careful editing. Just the truth. And if I don't like what I hear, then you walk away. His voice was rough. And I'll make sure you and Emma are protected and provided for, regardless. That doesn't change, Maya. You're not obligated to me. My throat tightened. Dominic, midnight, he repeated. I'll be waiting. The line went dead. I stood in the hallway outside Marco's office, my phone clutched in my hand, my heart hammering against my ribs. Every rational thought screamed at me to stay away, to protect Emma and myself from whatever darkness surrounded Dominic Santoro. But I thought about his hands, gentle on my daughter's forehead. His voice, breaking when he talked about his mother. The way he'd looked at me over dinner and said he wanted to protect my light. I needed to know. Needed to understand who he really was before I could decide if I was strong enough to walk away. Even if the truth destroyed us both. The warehouse was exactly what I expected, vast, shadowy, the kind of place where bad things happened in movies. A single light hung from the ceiling, casting a circle of illumination in the center of the space. Dominic stood within it, his suit jacket gone, vest unbuttoned, looking almost vulnerable in just his white shirt and dark pants. You came, he said when I approached, and I heard the relief in his voice. I need to know who you are, my voice echoed in the empty space. All of it. No more careful editing. Dominic nodded slowly. Okay, the truth. He took a breath. My father built an empire on protection rackets and gambling operations. Started small neighborhood bookmaking, security for local businesses. By the time he died, the Santoro organization controlled half the city's underground economy. The clinical way he said its organization, operations, made it feel both more and less real. I inherited that empire at 32, he continued, along with the enemies, the federal attention, the blood on the ledger. His jaw tightened. I've been trying to legitimize it. Transition the gambling into legal casinos, the protection into private security firms, the cash businesses into proper investments. It's slow, complicated, and it's made me enemies on both sides. Both sides? The old guard who think I'm going soft, and the authorities who think I'm just putting a legal face on criminal operations. He stepped closer. The FBI investigation isn't wrong, Maya. I've done things, hurt people who threatened my family, made deals that wouldn't survive daylight, but I'm trying to be better, to build something clean. Why? I whispered. Why change now? Because I'm tired. The admissions seem pulled from somewhere deep. Tired of looking over my shoulder. Tired of violence. Tired of being the man my father wanted instead of the man I could be. His dark eyes held mine. And then I met you. And Emma. And I realized what I actually wanted. What's that? A life. His voice roughened. A real life, with someone who sees me as more than a weapon or a wallet or a threat. Someone who looks at me the way you do, like, I could be good if I just tried hard enough. My throat tightened. I don't know if you can be what I need you to be. I know. Dominic moved closer, close enough that I could see the exhaustion in his face, the fear he usually hid so well. But I'm asking for the chance to try. To prove that what I feel for you and Emma is real. That I can protect you from my world while building something better. If you're convicted, I won't be. Steel entered his voice. My lawyers are the best. The evidence is circumstantial. The charges won't stick. He paused. But even if they did, I've protected you. Set up accounts in your name, a trust for Emma's future. Legal separations that ensure you're completely insulated from my business. You did all that? Shock colored my words. The day after the hospital, Dominic admitted, because I knew then, you two had become my everything. The raw honesty in his confession broke something loose in my chest. This is insane. We barely know each other, don't we? He stepped closer still, his hand coming up to cup my face. I know you sing under your breath when you're nervous. I know you take your coffee with too much sugar. I know you sleep curled on your right side because the left makes your shoulder ache. I know you're terrified of failing Emma, of becoming your mother, of letting anyone see how desperately tired you are. Tears blurred my vision. How do you know all that? Because I pay attention to what matters. His thumb brushed away a tear. Because you matter, Maya. You and Emmy, you're not an obligation or a cover story. You're the first thing I think about when I wake up, and the last thing before I sleep. You're what makes me want to be better. I'm terrified, I whispered. So am I. His forehead touched mine, and I felt him trembling. But I'd rather be terrified with you than safe without you. The words unlocked something I'd been holding back for weeks. I love you, I said, the admission torn from somewhere deep. I don't want to. I shouldn't. But I do. Dominic's breath caught. Maya, I love you, I repeated, stronger now. And I'm choosing you. Choosing this. Choosing us, despite everything. He kissed me then, deep and desperate, his arms wrapping around me like I was the only solid thing in his world. I kissed him back with all the fear and hope and reckless love coursing through me. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Dominic pressed his forehead to mine. I'll spend the rest of my life proving you made the right choice, he promised. I swear it. And standing in that warehouse, wrapped in the arms of a dangerous man trying to be good, I believed him. 6 months later, the federal charges were dismissed. I watched the news report from our kitchen, not my old cramped apartment, but the beautiful 3-bedroom Dominic had moved us into 3 months ago. Large windows, a real garden where Emma had planted her butterfly sanctuary. A neighborhood where children played outside without me holding my breath. Insufficient evidence, the anchor announced. Prosecutors citing procedural errors in the investigation of Dominic Santoro... I turned off the television as the front door opened. Emma's voice rang out immediately. Dad, I got a gold star on my spelling test. Dad. She'd started calling him that 2 months ago, tentatively at first, watching for his reaction. Dominic's eyes had gone suspiciously bright, and he'd pulled her into a hug that lasted several heartbeats too long. Now he swung her up easily, examining the test paper she thrust at him, every word perfect. That's my brilliant girl. Over Emma's head, his dark eyes found mine. It's over, he mouthed. Relief flooded through me so powerfully my knees weakened. Over, the investigation. The uncertainty, the fear that had been lurking beneath our happiness for months. Dominic set Emma down gently. Why don't you go work on your butterfly journal? I need to talk to your mum. Emma bounced off, clutching her test paper, already chattering to herself about which butterflies she'd seen today. The moment she disappeared down the hallway, Dominic crossed to me, pulling me into his arms. I felt the tension leave his body, months of controlled fear finally releasing. It's really done. I whispered against his chest. It's done. His voice was rough. The case is closed. The business transitions are complete. Everything's legitimate now. He pulled back to look at me. I'm clean, Maya. Finally. I touched his face, tracing the sharp line of his jaw. Are you okay? I'm better than okay. His smile was genuine. transforming his usually controlled expression. I have you. I have Emma. I have a life that's actually mine. He kissed my forehead. I'm happy. After Emma's bedtime, a ritual Dominic never missed. Complete with 2 stories and at least 3 glasses of water, he found me on our balcony. The city lights sparkled below, the same view from a different angle than that restaurant 6 months ago. Everything had changed. I was back in school now, taking online classes toward my teaching degree. Dominic had arranged a scholarship that fooled absolutely no one, but allowed me to accept his help with some dignity intact. Emma thrived at her new school, her asthma finally under control with proper medication and regular specialist visits. It wasn't the life I'd planned. It was stranger, more complicated, built on a foundation I never would have chosen. But it was ours. Are you happy? Dominic asked, wrapping his arms around me from behind, his chin resting on my shoulder. I leaned into him, breathing in his familiar scent. I'm terrified and happy and still angry at you sometimes for making me care this much. I turned in his arms. And so completely in love it scares me. Good. His smile was small but genuine. Because I have a question. He reached into his pocket, withdrawing a small velvet box. My breath caught. I was going to wait, Dominic said, opening the box to reveal a simple, perfect diamond ring. Do this properly, with fancy planning and romance. But I'm tired of waiting. The ring caught the light, sparkling like the city below us. Maya Rivera, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes, will you marry a man who's trying every day to deserve you? Who will spend his life making sure you and Emma have everything you need? Who loves you both more than anything he's ever loved? I thought about the envelope I'd rejected, the check I'd almost been too proud to take. About Dominic appearing at Emma's hospital bed like an answer to a prayer I hadn't known how to say. About fairy tales read at 3 a.m. and the way he held my daughter's hand like it was made of glass. About choosing love even when it came wrapped in complications. Yes, I whispered, and Dominic slid the ring onto my finger with hands that trembled slightly. This man who never showed weakness. Undone by my acceptance. He kissed me as the city lights sparkled below, and I tasted salt on his lips. Tears from him or me, I couldn't tell. Thank you, he murmured against my mouth. For seeing me, for choosing me, for letting me love you both. Thank you for not giving up, I replied. For showing up when I needed you. For becoming the man I needed you to be. Emma's voice drifted from her bedroom. Definitely not asleep yet. Probably eavesdropping. Does this mean Dom is staying forever? We both laughed, the sound light and free. Dominic called back, forever, Principessa. If that's okay with you? Yes. Emma's delighted squeal made us laugh again. I looked at the ring on my finger, then at the man who'd given it to me, this dangerous stranger who'd become my family, who'd seen me drowning and refused to let me go under, who'd fought his own darkness to build something bright for us. Forever, I echoed softly, and meant it with everything I had, because sometimes the most unexpected beginnings led to the most beautiful destinations. And sometimes love found you in the corner booth of an upscale lounge, in a hospital room at 3 a.m., in a warehouse where truth was finally spoken. Sometimes love looked like a mafia boss trying to be good. And sometimes that was exactly enough.